Um, we're Smooth 98.1 FM. Good morning and welcome. It's time for Freshly Pressed as we get into the local headlines this morning. Our guest is ready now to join us. And guess what? We've got the ingredients to get the show started like. We've got lemonades, we do lemonades, but right now we've got the newspapers right in front of us. We're going to make freshly pressed out of it and have a great time because we've got analysts here and we've got you also sending in your thoughts relating to the headlines this morning over to 0809 will be where we read your thoughts relating to the headlines this morning. And then we can also have you race down to YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos. That said, I say big good morning to Gbubemi Atimomo, the spirit and the age of hailings now. Maybe I should hail you, Gbubemi.
Good morning, Omas. Good morning, Lagos. Thanks for having me this morning.
All right. I hope it wasn't a case of you doing rehearsals of the national anthem, the old new one, right now in your sleep. You look like you did some of it while you slept.
Some of us will stick with the anthem that we know for a while.
Okay. So, Gbubemi, let's pick up the pace with this. The Punch newspaper is what we're looking at first, and let's go on to the headline where it says Insecurity. Reps debate foreign mercenaries option. That's what the Punch newspaper is leading with this morning. And we move to this and help talk us through this route we are heading to, if eventually we take it.
Okay, so as we all know, Nigeria has been plagued by a wide range of insurgency, banditry, kidnapping actions spread across not just the northeast, northwest, where we had a lot of all that activity, but gradually also creeping down towards the north central parts of the south as well, but predominantly up north. And it first of all started with Boko Haram, which we first have experienced, I think, about in the late 2000s, 2009, 2010, which is when all of this started. So we've been on this journey for, over 10 years already. Now the reps have deliberated and adopted a motion to invite foreign mercenaries to tackle the issue. So according to them, they recognize that the army is overwhelmed, and they are of the opinion that one of the best ways to be able to tackle this issue now is to be able to invite foreign mercenaries. According to them as well, Nigeria is not the first country, or Nigeria will not be the first country that will use foreign mercenaries, because there are other countries across the sub-region that have also invited mercenaries to help them in their fights against the insurgency. So the insurgency and terrorist action hasn't just affected just Nigeria, but other countries across parts of West Africa. So we have like Mali, Togo, Burkina Faso, and a lot of other countries also affected by terrorist activity. For me, this is an interesting proposition. Personally, I'd never thought about it because, as far as I was concerned, the army was up to the task. If we even think about it, when it comes to internal security, it's not really just the army that should be involved. It's actually the responsibility of the police. But as we know, the state of our police force is in dire straits of help. They themselves are overwhelmed, which is why the army has been invited to support, or should I even say take over all of this. So many people would not even realize that it's actually the police responsibility to tackle this. Anyway, moving on. So the police, so the army rather, tasked with the responsibility of fighting insurgency has been overwhelmed. Funding has been an issue that has affected the fight for the war as well. They're also overworked because they've been on this for a long time. So these are some of the reasons that have been adduced by the representatives for inviting foreign mercenaries, because as far as they're concerned, foreign mercenaries will come with an added vigor to be able to tackle this, because for them, it's really about what they are paid to be able to tackle this. So the motivation for a foreign mercenary, for example, would be how much they're being paid. Okay, so my thoughts on this largely are, one, foreign mercenaries would have to be paid good money. Currently, I do not think that we have a budget for paying foreign mercenaries. Some would argue that, okay, maybe some of the money that has been earmarked for the fight, which should go to the army, would be what would go to the foreign mercenaries. We can't say that for sure. But I believe that even if we get foreign mercenaries, they'd have to be supported by our indigenous army formations as well. So the thought is, should we get foreign mercenaries to support us? Well, according to the House of Reps, they have already moved for this motion and they'll be presenting it so that it can be further adopted. I'm not sure what the impact would be on Nigeria. There's a potential that the foreign mercenaries would address these issues critically and with a dispassionate action that may see us, get some sort of results. But for me, over and above even inviting a foreign militia, is what are the other things that we can do to be able to reduce, the impacts of insurgency on people. So, for example, what even led to the insurgency? What are the things that has encouraged it? We know that parts of the North, or largely parts of the North, have been racked with poverty, lack of opportunities, over the years, people have been displaced from their homes. A lot of people have had to stay in IDP camps or move down south where they've had to, look for how to make a living. And all of these things have affected them. So the absence of economic opportunities in those areas is a huge minus, which is one of the things that have perpetuated this thing. So you have a situation where, and, I will not say that I know this for certain, but, those who have perpetrated, a lot of all these terrorism actions have had to work with the locals. And there's no how they wouldn't work with the locals, that they would not support the locals economically. So they are acting as their source of livelihood, quote unquote. You understand? So, which is probably one of the reasons why, it's been hard to tackle them, because definitely some of these locals who ordinarily have been a source of local intelligence for security forces to tackle these things have been compromised. So for me, those are also some of the things that we also need to look at. How can we improve economic opportunities in those areas, even as we're trying to fight this war? So the solution, I believe, a palliative, maybe inviting this foreign mercenaries, but I'm not sure that is the final solution to this situation.
So just two quick issues from what you've raised so far before we move on to the next paper, Gbubemi. That relates to one, mercenaries. We've seen, because you alluded to the fact that it's been applied in some places. So let's go to places like Burkina Faso. We've seen the activities of the Wagner group on the continent, and we see what they've been doing. But again, you know how it is when you give people arms, and when it's time for you to take it away from them, it becomes a problem, i.e., the issues around the Niger Delta and how some people were armed for electioneering purposes back in the days. And then when it was done, mopping up the arms became a problem. Two, you raised the issue of funding. The issue of funding, every year we've seen defense budget in this country. It's never gone low. It's increasing. So where does the issue of funding come in as a matter of fighting the insurgency?
Okay, so for funding, interesting that you raised that as well. I believe, that there needs to be a lot more scrutiny with regards to the funding, because we've also seen situations where soldiers have, I'm not sure if mutiny is the right word to use, but soldiers have rebelled because a lot of them have said, oh, they've not been paid some of their allowances, they're at the war front, their families are not being paid, they do not have adequate weapons and all of that. So we're wondering, the funding that's provided to fight this war, where exactly has it been deployed to? Is it that what has been allocated is not enough? Or is it that there's some sort of issue with the funding that's been provided? That's left to determination and investigation by the army, I would say. With regards to your first question as well, yes, that's also a potential problem. Accurate that you cited the Wagner Group, which seems to be the preferred mercenary, around these parts as well. So for me, it's a situation of where you extend your hand and your arm is taken out from you. There's also that likelihood as well, because these sort of people, do not just entrench themselves; they also try to entrench the policies of their country, especially with Russia. We can see what Russia is doing across the subcontinent with the fight for resources across Africa. So that's also another potential. I'm not sure that's something that we as a country are ready or even prepared to deal with.
Okay. Well, it looks like racing back to grab a copy of Frederick Forsyth's Dogs of War would just be apt for after this time out, where just call and the Dogs of War will come running anyway. But let's go on now to our next paper this morning, Gbubemi, as we pick up this one. The Daily Trust newspaper with the headline here reading Chief Justice of Nigeria summons judge over conflicting orders on the Kano emirship. So there is what you call the Kano puzzle that looks more like it's beating the Sphinx puzzle right now. Take us through this one.
Okay, so this has been some sort of a messy situation, if I would say. If you recall, last week rather, an injunction was received to the Kano State House of Assembly repeal the law that splits the Kano Emirate into, I think, about four additional emirates. So essentially, they were reverting to the status quo of 2000, where there was only the Kano Emirate. The implication.
Okay, we'll just get Gbubemi to reconnect and we will be back shortly. So while we wait for Gbubemi to reconnect and join us quickly, let's go over messages we see already. Adegboyega is here with us, Dedeji, saying, bring mercenaries to fight insurgency in Nigeria is a waste of taxpayers' money. And then it goes, whoever that is behind these suggestions, they are doing so to make money from it. This is where we were when the U.S. military officers, experts from the states wanting to assist us in fighting insecurity. In the process, they found out all their efforts is bringing wasteful as a result of some insiders that are leaking their formats and actions. They were frustrated out. So getting mercenaries to fight insecurity is a means of making dollars. There is no terror group in Nigeria that isn't affiliated to one political party. This is what Adegboyega Adedeji alleges. Gbubemi, you're back. Let's pick up the pace from Kano.
Yeah, apologies for that. So like I had said, the Kano State House of Assembly repealed the law that split the Kano Emirates into about four sub-emirates. So essentially, they were reverting to the status quo as of 2000, where there was only the Kano Emirates. As a result of that, it implied, or what they sort of did was they got an injunction, by the Federal High Court in Kano, which ordered the eviction which ordered the reinstatement of the previous Emir of Kano, Muhammadu Sanusi II. What further happened was that a justice of the Kano State High Court, issued a separate order restraining the police from removing Sanusi, as a result of the fact that, another injunction was sought to maintain status quo with the should I say the current emir before the repeal of the law. So it's been sort of
Aminu Ado Bayero now.
Aminu Ado Bayero, yes. So which is sort of a messy situation. So for me, which is one of the reasons why the Chief Justice of the Federation has had to step in. So for me, I'm not quite sure how it works with the courts and all of that, but I would have assumed, to avoid these sort of situations that, one judge would have reached out to the other. So what we have is a situation where there's a federal high court and there's a state high court, and both of them are issuing separate orders that negate themselves. So I'd have assumed that there would have been a situation where there'd have been some sort of discussion to prevent this sort of situation. Because now, I've heard people make crack jokes and say, "Oh, Game of Thrones in Kano, for example, the fight for the throne," which should not have been. So ideally, once the law was repealed, and once the State House of Assembly had reinstated the previously deposed emir, whoever is trying to get another injunction to maintain the previous emir, Ado Bayero, as a judge, should have consulted first with the initial judge who ordered the reinstatement to avoid this sort of situation. Because what it implies, or what it sort of implies, is that the courts do not work in sync. There's no how the State House of the State House judge, the state judge rather, would not have been cognizant of the facts, of what had happened before. So basically, this is the reason why the Chief Justice of this Federation has had to step in. And what he has said essentially is that, they need to be able to determine um, the extent of the court's powers across the state. So who exactly has the responsibility to be able to provide the laws that determine who becomes or who is kept as the emir? So is it the federal high court? Is it the state high court? And this is a very important thing because maybe it's also good for our democracy that we have issues like this, so clarity can be sought in case, further actions like this also happen. But I welcome it. I think it's to prevent further yam pepper scatter, if you put it that way. It's very, very important that the Chief Justice has stepped in to seek clarity to this issue. So hopefully, in the days, in the weeks to come, we should have seen some sort of normalcy return to Kano.
So, Gbubemi, let's as we wrap up this the headline, in just about a minute. It seems if we look around the landscape of Nigeria, it isn't the first time we see dethronements, and even in recent times, from Delta, that's from Way to Warri, for example, the Warri Kingdom, and then down to even recently now, even when you stop by in Edo State, Benin City, exactly, you see people now being able to challenge the authority of what elsewhere very powerful kingship. What would you allude is responsible for this?
Okay, so my opinion is that our constitution has not adequately captured the role for traditional rulers. Traditional rulers are supposed to be the closest point to the people, sort of like in the local government system. Maybe what we could have had was, instead of a local government system, we could have had that local government system through the traditional rulers, because largely now, their roles are ceremonial. They don't necessarily have any powers except those that the state awards to them, which is why governors can step into these situations and exert some sort of influence, for example. So maybe what we should try and do is try to determine exactly the role of traditional rulers. Are they just purely ceremonial now? Do you expect them to have some sort of power in governance, in their local communities? If we do, to what extent do they have those powers? Those are the kind of discussions that we should have, actually, because otherwise they just remain ceremonial and subject to the influence of whoever appointed them or approved their appointment.
All right, let's quickly go over now to a few messages we can just throw in the mix. See, Izei's message, Z-Man from Bristol says, well, first reversal to old British national anthem. Now they want to hand over security to mercenaries. Is this a bid by, in his words, quote, clueless for, those in authority for Nigeria to be recolonized? That's Z-Man from Bristol speaking there. Then from the sideline now, we have A.B. Bozimore throwing this one in for us this morning. One of our analysts also saying, the best place we need foreign help or mercenaries should be in that very National Assembly. All of them should be sent home and replaced with mercenary legislators. My goodness, the preposterous things that come out of those legislative chambers. In quote, AB, you missed out hallowed chamber. That's what it is. But let's go on and pick up Darius' thoughts this morning. Olabode from Surulere is what I'm looking at this morning. Says, firstly, how would the mercenaries be scored whether they are making genuine progress? America was in Iraq for years and it turned out to be for selfish reasons. After the job is completed, is there a secure way to ensure the mercenaries will not turn out to be a threat to Nigeria? Then it goes on. They should just remove bad eggs in the military. Insurgency will end. That's from Olabode this morning. Let's go on now and pick up a Lagos-centric story now. Health, they say, is wealth. Vanguard newspaper runs with this headline, Lagos government begins free medical outreach for residents, releases locations in this quote, Alafia Eco health outreach.
Okay, so the Lagos State government has launched a free medical outreach, like you had mentioned, Alafia Eco. And the intention is to target providing essential healthcare services to 50,000 residents across 6 health districts of the state. The intention is that it should start today. As part of the free health checks, residents will get free blood sugar, blood pressure, HIV counseling and testing, eye testing, and free glasses as well. The focus is on treating minor ailments, providing free medications, also introducing the health insurance, the Lagos State Health Insurance Scheme to residents as well, and also as an opportunity to get more residents to register under the Lagos State Residents Registration Agency. So the assumption is that you'd need to be registered to be able to access this free healthcare service. Well, I think this is a very good initiative, also primarily because we have a lot of primary healthcare centers, across Lagos. A lot of people are not even aware, that there are primary healthcare centers. So, for example, it was only until around COVID before I realized that there was a primary healthcare center in my area, and I can imagine how many more people, that could have benefited from those services that haven't. And those agencies typically treat, minor ailments, provide antenatal services, little things that they can handle before they refer to, like the general hospital or the teaching hospitals. So this is a good initiative. We always wonder what government does with money. Well, this is one of the things that they're doing with money. I believe they can do more though, but well, this is a start. So yeah, kudos from me.
All right. I see, just as we let it just to rest the story, I see under this story, there is a need to also get to capture data. And I see there's something about Lagos State Resident Registration Agency, LASRERA registration embedded in it.
Yeah, so like I had mentioned, it's an opportunity for them to get people to register under the agency. So typically in Lagos, if you want to access any state service, you have to have your residence registration done. It's a smart move because it helps them capture data about the people in the state, So the assumption is that if people present themselves for these free healthcare services, they would first have to register before they can access the services, So it's a smart move, really. It helps with determining population and all of that. And Lagos State can use those numbers to plan.
Let's go over to the Punch newspaper where minimum wage, that's the Punch reporting now. Minimum wage. Federal government invites labor to resume talks Friday. That's tomorrow. The back and forth is going on. About 600,000 naira. No, 48,000 or 57,000 is what we can offer.
Okay, so the minimum wage discussion has been ongoing for a while, and it's been gathering momentum in the last few weeks. Labour, first of all, presented, so Labour and federal government have been in discussions, and then Labour presented a proposal for 600,000 naira, and they also provided a breakdown of, why they believe 600,000 should be the minimum wage based on their estimation of what the average citizen, with a family would spend. So there's been a bit of back and forth. Federal government has made its proposal. Labour has come back and said no, acquiesce and this. So Labour went down rather to 497,000. Federal government was at 57,000 and they moved it up to 60,000, an increment of 3,000. Labour also went down to 497,000. So I'm wondering, is 3,000 the magic number? Why are they all just shifting by 3,000? So the reality that the minimum wage must be improved, it goes without saying, if the minimum wage currently is 30,000 naira, even a single person, cannot honestly survive on just 30,000 naira in a month when you factor in transportation cost, feeding cost of utilities, sending children to school, even paying for your own education if you're single or those sorts of things. So that is not in doubt. However, agreeing on what that minimum wage should be is a critical factor. Labour has said, the federal government has said, through the Minister of State, that Labour should be more reasonable in accepting this minimum wage. If we look at what federal government is presenting now, 60,000, is 60,000 adequate for the average citizen to be able to live life? I'm not, so sure. By the time you calculate transport costs, by the time you calculate feeding costs, that 60,000 is probably gone. You haven't paid rent, you haven't paid your electricity bills, you haven't, done maybe some your personal shopping and all of that. So 60,000 may not all go well, but then again, in reality, on the one hand, the government can only pay from what it has in that sense, based on our income. And we know that our income, our revenue and income sources are dwindling. But then other people will also argue that if the government can fund things like subsidize things like Hajj, for example, that means there's some sort of money, or there's potential for some sort of money, because some people have said that Hajj is not subsidizing the Hajj, for example, or any pilgrimage is not a priority. So those are some of the things that people look at. When we also look at some other government spending or government allocation, we wonder if we're supposed to be managing money, if we're supposed to be, ensuring a bit of prudence, some of these expenses, expedient at this time. So those are some of the thoughts I'm sure that Labour has also has in their arguments, or pushing for better wages. So Labour is currently at 494,000. I believe that they will come down lower, but how much lower is what I'm not aware of. I'm hoping that that we can that Labour and the federal government can meet at a middle point at some point. But then again, one thing we also need to remember is that even the 30,000 minimum wage that we have in operation now, not a lot of states are paying that money. So even if the federal government and Labour agree to, on assumption, let's say 100,000, a state that wasn't paying 30,000 before is definitely probably not going to pay 100,000. So there's still a lot of questions, still a lot of issues, that need to be determined, regarding this.
So related to this, we'll go to the Daily Post newspaper to do a link up of the headline, because it's also related to spending and income and then food. But just quickly throwing a few messages in here. Ajayi Oloniluwa's thought from Magodo GI Sherry says, it's unfortunate that successive governments continue to beat about the bush in search of solution to the myriads of problems plaguing the country, even though the solutions are staring us right in the face. Imagine reverting to the old national anthem, mulling another round of cash transfer, school feeding program, mercenaries to fight insecurity, when simply restructuring the polity would do the magic. God help us. Ajayi Oloniluwa from GRM Agode Sherry sent us that one. Tony from Marine Beach says, whenever an abnormal situation prevails, some persons are cashing out big, and they will do anything, work through every means in high and low places to ensure status quo remains. We are in the middle of a very big thing as regards security in this country. Dan Okudwa's thought here says, well, it goes on, judges should be cautious to grant ex parte orders to, no matter the urgency. It is always better you put all the parties on notice. Thus, a lawyer, Barrister Dan Okudwa, sending that thought in there. So let's go on for this next one. Okay, we can leave this one out. Okay, so let's react quickly to the Daily Post story we're talking about, where the NBS has a figure out right now, and it's saying that the cost of healthy food, good food, surges by 110.7% in Nigeria. In summary, in about a minute.
Okay, so the NBS National Bureau of Statistics has, in its latest report on a healthy diet, reported that the cost of healthy food has doubled by 110%, 110.7% to 1,035 naira for a meal per day. If we multiply that by 30 days, that's already 30 something thousand, at the minimum. So we can see when we're talking about the minimum wage, if the minimum wage is 30,000 and it costs you to have one meal, it costs you 1,035 naira to have one meal a day, then the minimum wage can only pay for 30 meals in a month rather than at least 60 or 90 meals a day. So that's a problem, and this is linked to our food insecurity issues. So insurgency, terrorism has affected a lot of our natural agricultural sources. A lot of people are not going to the farm because of the insecurity issues. We also have climate issues that have affected yields and all of that. So all of these things, even, when we look at the Forex crisis, if some of these things have affected, our food situation. So all of these things have added up to balloon the cost of food, which is a problem. I know the federal government, even some state governments have collaborated to try and, address this issue, but we haven't quite reached a proper resolution. There needs to be a lot more emphasis and focus as much as possible, because food is one thing that's critical. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, you'll have to eat. So these things need to be addressed.
All right. I also find very interesting in the story that places as Ekiti, Ogun, and Osun states recorded the highest amount in terms of cost of feeding, when states like Kaduna and Kogi, Nasarawa are around the 700s. You're good enough. Your stomach is good to go for a meal. Well, interesting times ahead, but I see a message from Abel Ogili Onehi saying, inviting foreign mercenary is ultimately welcomed. It is not every time we use the aircraft to escape the terrorists and the kidnappers on our roads. Someday, somehow, we use the road. Therefore, using foreign mercenary could now bring the situation to normalcy. Abel from Lekki. And that's a wrap this morning. I want to say thank you to Gbubemi for your time.
Thank you very much for having me this morning.
All right, we hail you. Have a great Thursday. And thanks to everyone who sent in a message and tuned in. Up next will be time for the Grapevine. Everything Entertainment is our next bus stop at 8:15. Stay tuned.
Bye.